Kathy Black, who really devoted a career to making sure workers' rights are protected, have done an amazing job. I wouldn't be here talking to you and looking at the world as I do without Philip Hush. When I started out in safety and health in the late 70s, and we were forming an organization called the New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health, the people we looked to learn from was Jim Moran and Rick Engler. And I sat at his feet, and he really shaped the way I think about how workers should be protected and their role in that protection. I'm grateful, and Jim, let me thank you personally from this stage, because you really made a huge impact on me. So we're here today to remember and to mourn our brothers and sisters who were killed on the job. And I was speaking about this over the last couple of days with Mike Wright from the Steelworkers Union. And he said something really important to me. He said, these workers, these brothers and sisters who've been killed, they were heroes. And they were heroes not because of the way they died, and certainly not because their life was taken from them. Not because they gave their life, but their life was taken from them. And they're not heroes for that reason. The reason they're heroes is not how they died, but how they lived. They went day in, day out to dangerous jobs, putting their life on the line so they could bring the food home, the rent money home, to make sure their families led a decent life. And no one should have to sacrifice their life to protect their family. And that is a fundamental issue that we have to remember all the time. Today just reminds us of that, but in my office and in our conference room at OSHA, we're surrounded by photographs, just like the ones you have here. We've asked family members to give us photographs of their loved ones who were killed on the job, whose lives were taken from them. So we remember every day their stories. And they come and visit us, and they've really become part of our family. Yesterday we had a memorial event where Danielle Joel came, and she's a young woman whose father was killed. He's a logger in Michigan, and she's come a couple of years to Washington to talk with us. And a woman named Kathy Pierce, whose son, Chad, who's in early 20s, young man, got a job working for a subcontractor who repairs telephone, cell tower transmission equipment. And he was sent up with no-fault equipment, no-fault protection, in the rain, and fell to his death, never having been given the proper training. A few weeks ago, Tom Ward came to visit us. Tom is a masonry trainer. He works for the Bricklayers Labor Management Fund in Michigan, training young bricklayers. His father died at age 39 of silicosis. Tom was 12. He told us what it was like to grow up without a father. We remember all these people. I think a lot about Day Davis. And if you've heard me speak before, or if you've seen this movie about temporary workers, you know the story of Day Davis. But Day was a Job Corps graduate. He was a 21-year-old young man in Jacksonville, Florida. He had never worked a day in his life. He went through Job Corps to get training as a medical technician, but he didn't have a job yet as a medical technician, so he called it a staffing agency. And the staffing agency said, well, we have got a job for you tomorrow at the Bacardi Bottling Corporation. You need some help cleaning up broken glass and other things. And he was so thrilled. So he was told to show up with an orange safety vest and steel-tip boots, and he went with his mother to Walmart that morning, and he got those, and he showed up there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we have a video of what happened to him because we took the video from Bacardi, from their security program. You could see him greatly, he's enthusiastic. The first day at work ever, got some gloves, got a broom, and was told to go clean up the broken glass under the palletizer where all the rum bottles were sort of aggregated and put in boxes. When rum bottle breaks, spills rum, get very sticky, so things were often sticking to the conveyor belt and then falling off, and so there were a lot of broken glass around. And the palletizer was a big sign saying, "Danger, do not enter." This kid had never gotten any training. He didn't know what the words lockout, tagout meant. And the foreman said, go clean up the broken glass. Of course, what would you have done in that situation? So we see him, running with this broom and going under this machine, and then we could see someone turning the machine on. And Day Davis's first day on the job was his last day on Earth. And we get too many stories like that. We call them first-day fatalities. Yesterday, a different one came in. There was a young man who was given a job of cutting grass at a golf course. And he had never worked in industrial grass trimmer before, and the rollover bar was not on there, and he rolled over into 2 feet of water and he drowned. First day on the job. So we mourn 13 workers every day killed on the job in the United States. 13 workers every day. Now, at one level, as outrageous as that is, we should be pleased because things are getting a little bit better. 45 years ago, OSHA started. In fact, our anniversary was yesterday. Because Workers' Memorial Day is also the same day that OSHA started. So 45 years ago, in 1971, OSHA opened its doors. And in 1971, there were about 37 deaths every day in the American workplace. Now we've got a workforce that's twice as large, so we're down to 13 deaths a day, but 13 deaths a day. So we're making some progress. But we have a long way to go. And these deaths, they occur in all sorts of industries and all sorts of workers. We're very much focused on the most vulnerable workers, the day laborers who take jobs, who are afraid to complain, who have no union, who are told to overload an elevator going up a construction site, and just they've got to do it, or they're out of luck and they're afraid of being turned into the immigration if they turn it down or complain. We regularly see serious injuries and fatalities among workers who don't speak English. And we'll go to the employer and say, well, were they trained to do this job safely? And they'll say no. And we'll say, well, why not? They say, well, they didn't speak English. And we say to that employer, if you hire a person to do a job, you have to be able to train them to do the job safely. And that's the law. But so many employers don't understand that. But it's not only the most vulnerable workers, the immigrant workers, the day laborers who suffer this. We see workers killed in some of the largest, most well-known, richest companies in the country. There's a Goodyear plant in Virginia where 3 workers have been killed this year. I just was in Birmingham, Alabama, visiting the union of the U.S. Steelworks, where they had 2 workers killed last year. There's a DuPont plant in LaPorte, Texas, where 4 workers were killed in the same incident a year and a half ago. And of course, the 2 brothers at Amtrak, Joseph Carter Jr. and Peter John Adamovich, were just killed. There's no excuse for this. And of course, it's not just fatalities. On OSHA logs, employers record about 3 million injuries a year. And now these are serious injuries. It's beyond first aid, because if it's just first aid, it doesn't get a log. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that 3 million workers are seriously injured on the job every year. And they've done some very interesting studies recently where they compare the injuries that are listed on OSHA logs with injuries that show up at emergency rooms or first reports in the workers' comp system. And they will tell you now that the estimates they made, that 3 million, is somewhere between a 40 and 70% underestimate. So there could be 4 million workers injured on the job every year, 5 million workers injured on the job every year. And this is not known to the public. There's not a lot of discussion about this. There are new illnesses, there are new issues out there. The Zika virus we're very concerned about, but nothing comes anywhere close to this sort of toll in America right now. Yet it's not really part of the national discussion. Of course, we're not even talking about illnesses here. And we don't know how many people are developing work-related illnesses because they're not reported by employers, and in many cases they wouldn't know because it's years later. But there's some pretty good studies that show that based on exposures that occurred in the past, decades ago, probably 50,000 Americans die every year from work-related illnesses. Now, we're making progress on some of these areas. Now, some of the truly bad hazards that have been out there in the American workplace are lessening. And certainly we don't see much asbestos anymore in the American workplace. I'm proud of the role of the sheet metal workers, and this is anyone here from the sheet metal workers? This is your hall. But I used to be an epidemiologist. I like to think I still am, but I haven't done any studies in a long time. But a lot of the early work I did was with sheet metal local 28. And these are workers who were not supposed to have been exposed to asbestos because they never sprayed it on. But like many other construction workers, they'd go into buildings to do renovation. They'd move around, the various parts of the ventilation system, and they'd have to knock asbestos out. And we found 1 in every 100 deaths was from mesothelioma. And out of that came a national screening program that the union and the employers and the industry started. But OSHA has issued good standards on a couple of these chemicals, asbestos, benzenes. We don't see them, but there's still thousands of chemicals in the American workplace that we don't have good standards for. So we need to re-look at this. The bottom line here is that there's a basic human right involved. The basic right to be able to go to work and not be hurt. And when you think about it, that is a basic right. But rights are never just given to people. You have to fight for them. The right to vote wasn't given to everybody in the United States. It was fought for first by a group of white men, and then by women, and then by African Americans, but it never comes without a struggle. And the same is true for the right to be able to work safely, to come home at the end of your job shift in the same condition as when you went there. And that's a basic right. And before the OSHA Act, before the OSHA law was passed 46 years ago, that wasn't even recognized. But now we have a law that says it. But just because we have a law, it's not enough. But OSHA is doing everything it can to make sure that right is real. I don't know if you know the folks from OSHA. Who here works for OSHA? Stand up for a minute, if you would. I know we've got a bunch of people who work for OSHA here. If you don't know these people, you should. Because these are people who, day in, day out, we're doing all our best, but we can't do it alone. And obviously that's why you're here, and that's why we look at organizations like Philipposh and your unions as our closest allies. Now, some of the things we've done recently, and you heard a little bit from Barbara, we're trying to change the focus of some employers. Because our fines are too low, and our criminal penalties are embarrassing. And when I think about this, and I look at Mary and the Davis family, I think about Jeff Davis and what OSHA could do and couldn't do when he was killed at the Motiva factory, the Motiva refinery. Now that Motiva now has changed hands, but this used to be owned by Saudi Aramco and Shell. Two of the biggest companies in the world, two of the richest companies in the world. Now, after that terrible event, and I don't want to call it an accident because there's nothing accidental about these activities, but after that terrible incident which killed Jeff Davis, and there was a huge acid explosion, OSHA came in and we issued one of the larger fines we've issued. That was somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. Which really is nothing for a company like Shell or Saudi Aramco. I mean, it's not even petty cash. Now the EPA followed us in because that same acid that then spilled into the water killed crabs and fish. And their fine was many times higher than ours. It was millions of dollars rather than thousands of dollars. And there's something wrong with that. That we value the lives of fish and crabs more than we value the lives of people. Now it's changing a little bit. Congress has finally given us permission to raise our fines, and we're going to do that in July, starting in August. They still won't be high enough, but they will be significantly higher. But for big companies, even a $100,000 fine, $1 million fine doesn't really mean much. But one thing that does focus the attention of employers, I believe, to make them value the lives of their workers is the possibility of jail time. And we're so pleased that this is an initiative of Philipposh. It's something that we're very much focused on as well, increasing the likelihood that employers who value their machines more than they value the lives of their workers should face jail time. Now, we've just signed an agreement with the Justice Department, and under this administration, the Justice Department has made a commitment to us to take these OSHA cases and to take them very seriously. Now, it would be great if the OSHA law said that if you kill a worker, you go to jail, but it doesn't say that. The OSHA law says that if you kill a worker and you have a willful violation, so it's a pretty high bar to begin with, and the worker is killed, the maximum penalty is a misdemeanor. 6 months in jail, and that's 6 months for the corporation in most cases. That's pretty meaningless. But the Justice Department recognizes the limits to this, and so they're willing to take on this issue of what we sort of call the Martha Stewart crime. Because it turns out a lot of the same employers who kill workers also lie to the inspectors. And you could get 10 years or more for lying to inspectors. So the Justice Department has said, it's not good enough, but we're going to pursue these for us. So they need our help, they need your help to pursue these cases. But I believe that if we had more criminal prosecutions of employers, we'd have a much bigger impact on changing the efforts of many employers. So another part of that basic set of rights that workers have is the right not to be exposed to hazardous chemicals. And OSHA standards are old, they're out of date. We tell people actually don't use our standards in many cases because they're so weak. Protect people far more than that. But one thing we have been successful with, and this is almost 20 years after we announced we were going to issue new regulations, 40 years after NIOSH told us to do it, and 80 years since the greatest Secretary of Labor, Francis Perkins, said the US government has to help eliminate silicosis. We finally issued a strong silica standard. It's going to save hundreds of lives and change the way construction is done in the United States. And I'm very proud of that. But we do have a long way to go. And we need to strengthen our health standards. We also have to make sure that workers have another right, which is the right to raise their concerns. We see over and over again systems that ensure that when a worker raises a concern, either by telling their employer that there's a hazard, or even reporting an injury, because what better way to report a hazard than to report an injury? That is proof that there's a hazard. We see systems which discourage workers from doing that and sometimes retaliate against them from doing that. Now, we have a whistleblower protection program, which really was a backwater before the Obama administration began. We've doubled the staffing and increased funding, and we're really trying to do a better job. We've got a long way to go, but this is a fundamental right as well. And we see systems now that employers don't want cases to go on their OSHA logs. They want to be able to say, our injury rate's really low. The poultry industry, for example, which is a high hazard industry, workers working in cold conditions with sharp knives, or sometimes not as sharp as they should be, that's even worse, but sharp, and they're spending the day, deboning chickens and cutting chickens or hanging chickens, and it is terrible work. So we recently were in one poultry plant where they had a first aid station run by either a licensed practical nurse or an EMT, but someone who's not licensed really to practice medicine. And before going to see the company doctor, you had to go to the first aid station. And workers would go there, and they'd regularly be told, go back to work. So one woman, after a month of working there, she started feeling sort of tingling in her hands and pain in the wrist. So she went to the first aid station, and they maybe gave her an aspirin, and they said, go back to work. She did that. She had to go 94 times before she actually was seen by the doctor. At that point, she had developed very serious bilateral, both wrists, carpal tunnel syndrome, and had to have surgery, and is facing a lifetime of pain and disability. But think about how many workers quit before they got to that point. And so the injury rates are very low in that industry. So we're focusing on ways to change that. We know this is an important issue that workers have to have the right to raise their voices and to report their injuries. And without that right, and you'll hear more about that in the next week or two, we have some big announcements coming on that. But we have to change what's going on in the United States. So one way we really have to look at this is at the workers' comp system. Because right now, it's very clear. There are very few, if any, workers with occupational illnesses who ever get workers' compensation. And many, many workers who are injured never get workers' comp. And that's for lots of reasons, none of the good ones, but certainly workers who are not here on the documented status are afraid to apply. And in many states, the workers' comp system is just so terrible. If you have any sort of insurance, you prefer to go to your own health insurance, even though you're paying for it. It's out of your pocket. But what we see is, when you look at the true costs of worker injuries and illnesses, workers' comp picks up about 20%. Who picks up the rest of it? Workers and their families, of course. And a significant portion, more than 10%, is actually covered by federal dollars, programs like Social Security, Disability, and Medicare, which essentially means the taxpayers, you and I, are subsidizing dangerous employers. And so until the true costs of workplace injuries are on the employers who cause those injuries, we're not going to see any changes in the system. And so we've got to look at the system and say, there's a better way to do this. We have to make sure the true costs are borne by the people who cause the problem, and if we do that, there'll be some real incentive to prevent more people from being injured. But until we change that set of incentives, nothing's going to happen. But also there's a larger discussion. There are lots of things we could talk about, what OSHA should do, what unions should do. But the country has to change the discussion. We need to change the conversation. How many people here are following this Takata airbag business? So there's this company that made airbags. They're faulty. For various reasons, they get set off. And a number of people have been killed. How many people have been killed by Takata airbags? So far, that we know of? 14. Now that's a day in the American workplace. One day. Yet we're having congressional hearings about these 14 deaths. Takata is going to, and a lot of the car companies are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on recalls and replacing it. But workers' lives are devalued. When we read about workplace fatalities, workers are killed, you read the newspaper article, and it almost always says the same thing. A worker was killed in such and such a construction site, such and such a factory, and it says the police investigated and determined it was an accident. And then OSHA, and OSHA will investigate. Well, it wasn't an accident. An accident suggests a randomness. And there's nothing random about these events. They're predictable and they're all preventable. Every one of them. But people think, well, there's something called occupational hazard. It comes with a job. When you sign up for that job, you've accepted that risk. And that's wrong. No one takes that risk their life, or risk their lungs or their limbs for a paycheck. It's against the law. It's against the basic human rights. But we don't have that discussion. It's an accident, and the police walk away. So we need to change that conversation about deaths. We need to change that conversation about injuries. I told you about the poultry industry. We're very much focused on that because we see tremendous number of ergonomic problems. We have one, NIOSH, our sister agency, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, went into one factory in South Carolina where they do poultry processing. They found that 42% of the workers had carpal tunnel syndrome. And they went to another one in Maryland where 38% had it. It's not just ergonomic conditions. There's one plant in Ohio we went into, and they actually had 2 amputations in this firm after we started our inspections. One finger was lost. It was a 17-year-old boy who was on the cleaning crew. He came in at night, whose leg was chopped off in one of their machines. Now this is KFC's Supplier of the Year of a couple of years ago. You look at the headlines. KFC gave this company a big award, and no one's talking about KFC, but they should be. And you go onto the website, this is called Case Poultry. Their website says that they are absolutely dedicated to good conditions and help the welfare of the chickens. Walmart, if you read Walmart in the news yesterday, Walmart announced that in a couple of years they'll move to cage-free eggs. They will only sell eggs from chickens that could run around. And you go to the supermarket, Big signs now, cage-free eggs, the free-range chickens. But no one is talking about protecting the health and safety of the poultry worker. What we have to do, all of us together, we've got to change this conversation, and we have to demand that Americans care as much about the health and safety of workers as they do about the birds in these factories. And if we do that, we'll have a big effect. So thank you all for what you do.